To what shall we compare the kingdom of God? It's a question we've been asking for as long as people have been wondering about God, I suppose. Maybe not necessarily the kingdom of God, that's a particularly Christian concept, but we've been trying to find analogies, ways to explain our relationship with the divine. Variations on a theme, if you will. The question of the kingdom of God is really the question of who God is. Today's parable compares the kingdom of God to a mustard seed. It is like a mustard seed that when sown in the ground is the smallest of all the seeds on the earth. But once it is sown, it springs up. It becomes the largest of plants and puts forth branches so that birds of the sky can dwell in its shade. Now we know Jesus was exaggerating, but the point is made. Mustard seeds are tiny, and they do grow into large bushes. And so the reign of God in God's presence is such that from something minuscule, or something perceived to be so small, it can fill up any space it occupies. That God's love and care and hope and justice can overcome any hurdles. But you might look at a mustard seed in a different way. Because when you foster it and cultivate it, when you grind it up and mix it with a little water and vinegar, you come up with this extremely powerful condiment. And anyone who has had the sensation of hot mustard cleaning out your sinuses knows just how powerful this can be. Now, I'm not saying that the kingdom of God is like you reeling back and trying to catch a breath from mustard, but sometimes it brings you something unexpected in something so common and familiar that can catch you off guard and surprise you. And I'd like to think that the kingdom of God does the same thing. Surprising me, catching me unaware, making me pause, making me catch my breath. When the unexpected is made manifest in the mundane, when we catch glimpses of that mustard seed inside us that has grown to fill our hearts and moves to cry out for justice and peace, to long for the God who alone can satisfy our deepest desires. But there are other ways to describe the kingdom of God welling up in our hearts. C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite authors, called it surprised by joy. His accidental discovery and consequent search for the phenomenon that he called joy. A longing so intense for something so good and so high up it could not be explained with words. Something that he later realized was the kingdom of God, God touching his heart. I call it joy, C.S. Lewis says. It is itself a memory of a memory. As I stood beside a flowering currant bush on a summer day, there suddenly arose in me without warning, as if from a depth not of years but of centuries, the memory of that earlier morning at the old house when my brother had brought his toy garden into the nursery. It is difficult to find words strong enough for the sensation that came over me. It was a sensation, of course, of desire. But desire for what? Before I knew what I desired, the desire itself was gone. The whole glimpse withdrawn, the world turned commonplace again, or only stirred by a longing for the longing that had just ceased. In a sense, the central story of my life, C.S. Lewis says, is about nothing else. The quality common to these experiences is that of an unsatisfied desire which is itself more desirable than any other satisfaction. I think that is what we can compare the kingdom of God to. Something that is fleeting sometimes, something we cannot capture, but something that turns our world on its head. There is a mysterious quality to it, and yet we know it so well. It is at once that which is most familiar, and yet almost impossible to describe. And it is nothing that we do, or merit, or earn. It is a gift freely given by a God who loves us and called us even before we knew it. The same God who loves us first. Because this is how the kingdom of God is, Jesus says. It is as if a man were to scatter seed on the land and would sleep and rise night and day, and through it all the seed just sprouts and grows, and he doesn't really know how. Because the process isn't something we control, much as we would like to. The process is something very much initiated by God. And the kingdom, well, the kingdom just continues to yield its fruit as God wills it. Which is why St. Paul can say today that we walk by faith and not by sight. Because this isn't really our project. We aren't leading this. This is God's work. God is a sower. God provides the rain. God provides the sun. God provides the nutrients. God gives us the grace. Grace that is always free. Grace that always exists. Grace that is always available. Grace that is always good. Grace that is always victorious. Grace that can transcend repression or addiction or every other internal or external power that seeks to oppress the freedom of the human heart. And grace, which is where our hope lies. St. Augustine once said that God is always trying to give good things to us, but our hands are always too full to receive them. Perhaps it's not surprising then that we do the same thing with our deepest longings for God. God does not always come to us in the pleasant ways we might expect, and sometimes hope can be an elusive thing. Because mustard seeds are small and slip easily through our fingers, they are easy to overlook. But they're there, and they eventually grow, and they will continue to surprise us with joy.